Hello and welcome to Thursday Talk, the casual, structure-free message where I just talk. You guys know the drill. Well, the good news is I got my energy back, so I can be animated. Woo! Yeah, last week I was tired. I am better this week. And with that said, let's start. I'm gonna start off reading my very high-tech scripture, which is found in Proverbs 22:6, and it reads, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." So, welcome GPS Internacional. Este mensaje en inglés no sé si puedan entender. So, with that said, welcome. And today I'm gonna sort of continue off where I left last week. And last week I was talking about my experiences through Sabbath School as a student. Today I'm going to be talking about my experiences in Sabbath School as an adult, as an instructor, as a teacher, as a minister, right? Well, I mean, I'm not minister, but I was involved in children's ministry. You guys know what I mean. So that's today's subject. You don't need to have watched last week's Thursday Talk, but it helps. So with that said, let's jump right in. So I believe it was winter of 2008, and the church decided to put me in the Sabbath School department. Not as a teacher, not just yet. I was supposed to help out in that department in what was essentially an effort of getting the young people involved. Now, I didn't realize that at the time, but clearly, the Sabbath School department didn't want me there. Now, I would later find out that typically Sabbath School is run by women. And I was not a woman, and I was a little young, so there wasn't exactly I wasn't exactly welcome. I mean, they loved me, before that and after, but there was just, I guess they felt I was stepping on toes. But anyways, I get nominated, and before our year even begins, right before we even take the office, we decided to meet so that we could pick next year's teachers. And funny enough, when it came to the children's teachers, right, for the Sabbath School lesson, nobody wanted to do it. It seemed everybody had a negative experience and everybody had given up, and the people that we did call, they all just had just negative things to say about the kids, like not doing it, they're the worst, forget about it. So it became this issue that we as the Sabbath School department were getting desperate. So eventually one of the ladies in the Sabbath School department asked Eli, "Why don't you do it?" Now, before I continue, I have to say that I am leaving many parts out of this story. And the reason why I'm doing this is because there are some things better left in the past. And when dealing with minors, it's a little tricky. So overall, I'm not giving you guys the full story, but there is a reason for that. I'm not just omitting it for the purpose of lying. I'm omitting it for the purpose of not stirring up old drama, if that makes sense. So anyways, they asked me to be the teacher, and I accept. So they tell me that I was going to be working with, let me see if I still remember how it works. It's cradle roll, kindergarten, primary. They tell me I'm going to be working with primary. So I'm getting ready for primary, this month, and I'm reading ahead, and I'm trying to meet these kids, but I didn't realize who in our church was primary. But I would talk to the current teachers, and they just didn't really care. So anyways, eventually it's our turn, right? Our term begins, and they just throw me into the Sabbath School class. I'm teaching primary. I still don't know who the primary kids are, so I go to the primary classroom. I sit up. And I'm waiting, and then in walk all these kids who were clearly not primary age. They were juniors. So at first I'm taken a lot back, like, wait, you guys are my class? You guys are clearly juniors. You're not primary. So, I do the class, and afterwards I meet with the Sabbath School department, which I was a part of. And I'm like, hey, we got a little miscommunication here. It seems my class is juniors, but you guys gave me the materials for primary. And well, basically this wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. And this is one of those things, like I'm telling this story not for the point of criticizing anybody, just to share my personal experience. So I don't know what made the church give up. Again, earlier I had mentioned that nobody wanted to be the teacher. But now I'm talking to the Sabbath School department, and the Sabbath School department just doesn't seem to be showing that they care. And they just basically looked me in the eye and said, well, those kids are not smart enough or spiritual enough to do juniors class. And I look at them like wow, like that's strong coming from the Sabbath School department, who's supposed to try the best. And I explained to them my point of view, which is children are as capable as we treat them. So if we treat them like they don't understand, then they won't understand. And if we treat them like they can, then they will. But, the Sabbath School department just wasn't budging, and they were looking at me like I was trying to cause trouble. And I'm just looking at them like, hey, all I want is to teach them at their level. And eventually they're like, okay, fine, what do you want, Eli? And I tell them what I want. Like, I want the materials. Like, okay, fine, we'll place an order for it. That's what they told me. They were going to place an order for it. And from there, wait, did I miss something? Hang on, my mind just blanked. Oh, yeah. So I every week that I would go to church, I would ask, the materials get here yet? And they would used to be like, not here yet, but they would try to convince me. They're like, Eli, you're overthinking this. You're not supposed to change anybody. You're just supposed to show up, do the lesson, and then leave. And I was like, well, with all due respect, if that's all you want me to do, then I would just quit, because I feel like that's a waste of time. Like, no, I didn't agree to be the Sabbath School teacher just to do the bare minimum. And for the record, I never really wanted to be the Sabbath School teacher. It just happened. But that's how I started. It was a very awkward thing where I felt that the way the church was operating around my particular class was wrong. And I just wanted what I believed to be a level playing field. But the Sabbath School department, directors, leaders, they didn't want to give it to me because they felt that I was trying to do too much. And I really didn't, because, again, if things really were as bad as all the former teachers said it was, then clearly we need change. That's just how I see it. But apparently, they didn't really see it that way. And that always irked me. And so this sort of led me to the what I like to call the first big battle, in which I sort of broke many rules. And maybe break rules isn't exactly fair, but there is a policy and procedure to getting change done at church, and it's important that we follow that policy and procedure. But I was young. I was, I believe, 22, and I may have skipped policy and procedure and done things in a way that, if could go back in time, I would do differently. Even though I believe that if I did them differently, I would have gotten different results. Anyways, in this period, many months were wasted, right? In which there was a back and forth between me and the Sabbath School department, and then eventually, it just led to the pastor speaking to me like, Eli, what's going on? Like, there's clearly some issue here. And I explained to the pastor my whole point of view and everything, and the pastor was like, well, I wish you would have told us this sooner, because then we could mediate. And I just remember telling the pastor, if I told you sooner, they would have swept it under a rug. Now, for the record, I don't know that they would have. That was just me speaking out of emotion. And the pastor spoke, and the Sabbath School department felt embarrassed, because the situation sort of put them in a corner where they could not look good. And they explained everything and their side of the story, and pastor, eventually I get the good news that I was going to be getting my materials. And so I won that battle, but I did not win the war. I really felt there was bad blood between the Sabbath School department and I. Again, I don't know if it was for the fact that I was trying to change things, or that I was too young, or that I was a man. I felt, as part of the deal of getting my materials, that it was best if I stepped down from my position as one of the Sabbath School department associates. So I stayed as a teacher, not as an associate for the department. So that was that. And let me tell you about the children themselves. So I told you about the friction with the department. So I get to the kids, and yeah, these kids were a handful. All the former teachers were not kidding. I remember that whenever I would try to speak, one of them would always be like, "My," like the Finding Nemo board, like "My," and then I would look and stop, and they would act like nothing happened, and then I would go back to the lesson, and then another one would go "My," and it will keep going until a while it was all them going "My," and they would be laughing like it was hilarious, and it wasn't hilarious. But it's one of those things, you know. I always, in those days, I would always remember to keep calm, because the point wasn't for me to get through the Sabbath School lesson. The point was for me to get through these kids' minds and hearts. Like, that was the point. So even though I wanted to lose my patience and flip the table, I never did, because I realized that's not what we're doing here. I gotta teach these kids the gospel. I gotta teach these kids the love of Christ. But how do I do it? How do I do it when they're driving me insane? One day I remember, as I'm doing the class, one kid kept singing a song from a video game. And then rather than me telling him to stop singing the song, what I do is I sing the next lines of the song. Because when an adult does something, that something is no longer cool. You guys already know, this is the rule. If an adult does something, it is no longer cool. So I do it, and they all look at me like, "How do you know that video game?" And I'm like, "I'm a gamer too. Like, what do you guys think, bruh?" And they never sang that song again. I also believe that made people relatable to them, to know that we had, some common interest. I was a gamer. We can't really talk about video games on Sabbath, which is a shame, because if we could, I would probably get through to them even more. Another thing that I did with them is that in the months prior for me getting the materials that I wanted, I would just print the materials on my own and give them to everybody. So that cost me money, because I was using my printer and my ink. I wasn't using the church printer and church ink. But I was doing that because I wasn't gonna wait around for the church to get the stuff. And I'm glad I did, because 6 months went by before I got my stuff. So really half the year, 2 quarters before I got what I wanted. Because again, that was a whole ordeal. But I was doing that out of my pocket. And also I would try to do visuals. So I'd bring my laptop, and I would always put a short YouTube video of that covered the lesson matter, the topic, I should say, the lesson topic. Kids are visual, you know, they like to see that. And yeah, and I also try to use the Bible a lot, which kids, not a fan of the Bible, but I always, as best as I could, I tried to use the Bible. And that was sort of my way of sort of chinking away at the armor, as they always tried and tested me, because they wanted to see if they could break me. I also had this box. Now, before I get to this box, which right now is it's an empty box, let me tell you, our church's budget for primary class was zero. It was non-existent. So everything that I purchased, all the crayons and coloring books and rulers and paper, that came out of my own pocket. And I figured it was a worthy investment, even though I was working minimum wage and part-time. I realized that this was the break. This is it, right? I had to put my money where my mouth was. If I really wanted to do this, it was going to cost me a pretty penny. And a pretty penny it did. So I got one of these boxes. Hello, Maribel. I'm sharing my stories of my time as Sabbath School teacher. So I'm going to go over as much as I can in this time period. So I bought one of these boxes, right? It was the same size and everything. And I filled it with the crayons and pencils and prizes and everything. And this was my ministry box, and I would leave it in the Sabbath School classroom. And so I also had my Bibles in there and everything. So I as best as I could, I really tried to get on their level and just show that I cared. Now, a funny thing about this box is that one day, few weeks after I purchased and after there, I show up and I realize that some materials are missing, right? They took some things out of it. Now that's nobody's fault, because they probably walked in there, didn't know what it was, and thought, hey, free materials. But again, this was coming out of my own pocket. So I had to go about and rebuy the materials that were missing, put them in a box, and this time I was hoping that nobody would take it. So a few weeks later, and not only are many materials missing, actually I think everything was missing. Wait, no. I show up and the box is practically empty. So what I did is I put tape on it and I wrote property of Eli, do not touch, which I also did in this lid, right? But I'll get to this lid later, right? So property, do not touch, right? So I did that, thinking that it would deter them. So again, I restocked the box and I put that on there. And a few weeks later, I show up and everything is missing except the lid. I show up, the lid is there. There were some broken crayons on the floor and some wrappers. My prizes were all gone. Even the bottom of the box was gone. Like this part, that was gone. And I was just thinking to myself, what happened here? Like this is church. I would not expect people to be stealing inside the church. And again, you can't say they didn't know because I wrote it right on the lid, which they chose to leave behind. I guess they were trying to be funny. They were like, if the lid says property of Eli, then we're gonna leave the lead. We're gonna leave it behind, right? But then they took everything that didn't have my name on it. And over the years, I've found pens around the church that belonged to me because they were from the box and scissors, and they've ended up in all sort of corners of the church. So I guess my materials never left the church. But these weren't church materials. These were my materials that I purchased with my own money. So I had to get smart. So I purchased this other box, which, as you guys can see, it has a lock on the side. So I purchased that box, put a lock on it, and then I hid it in the church's basement behind, I believe, an air duct or something. And every day I would get it, and I would use it and then put it back and forth. And then eventually I bought the second box. This box had a handle, right? Which I could then use to carry back and forth from my house to the church. So this box would stay in the church and this box would come with me. And that is kind of what I did because there were a lot of itchy fingers in the church and that was not good. And so once again, this ministry was going to cost me if I really wanted to do this. Not only would the church not give me a budget, but I had to pay for it on my own, and on top of that, people were using my materials for their ministry, like it was somehow an open box for everybody. That's not what it was. So, anyways, that was another of the many experiences that I had in Sabbath school. Another thing was, I was for the most part alone with these kids, right? I didn't have a helper, which was not good because some of these kids had ADHD or something. I remember there was one kid was always jumping up and down and screaming on the tables, and I would tell the church, right? And they wouldn't do anything. And then I told the parents one day, and the parents look at me like, that's not my problem. He's your problem for the next few hours. And I'm like, what do you mean he's my, like, he's your child? And if the audacity that some parents had, they looked at me like I was a free babysitter. No, that's not what my job was. And I wasn't into giving that. And oddly enough, whenever something went wrong in the church that involved a child, people looked at me like, why don't you do anything about it? Yet when I needed help from them, they would all be like, not our problem. I said this last time, but if you see your Sabbath school teacher or your former Sabbath school teacher or just a Sabbath school teacher, thank them because they're doing a good job, that they're not being recognized and they're not being paid, and it is a headache sometimes. What else did we do? Right, so let me talk about the lessons themselves. So I mentioned that we finally get the materials that I wanted so that I could give them an age-appropriate lesson. Problem was, these age-appropriate lessons were kind of short. It didn't really cover the whole story, and I felt like I was not giving the kids that full spiritual meal that they needed, So, like I mentioned earlier, I would use the Bible. So typically, I would just go over the whole story in the Bible in that small time, try to get answer all the questions and get them to leave satisfied. You guys know what I'm saying? Like, but the problem was that because the lessons were so short, it would take like 3 to 5 weeks to cover the whole thing. So for those 3 to 5 weeks, we were pretty much doing the same lesson over and over and over again. And each time I tried to do a different focus, which wasn't always possible. But I tried my best. I really did. And I also would try to use some time to answer their questions about just anything that they might have. And sometimes these kids will surprise you and they would ask good questions. I'll get more into that later. But yeah, that was my main experience that first year of Sabbath School. Oh wait, I forgot. So I didn't have a helper, and I had to do everything myself, which was it was hard. Because I had to do the class and keep him in control, and I don't even know how I did it. Again, to all you Sabbath School teachers, I salute deep. Oof. So anyways, the first year goes by, and for the next year, not only did I return as teacher, but they also made me one of 5 associates for AY, which of course is Adventist Youth Ministry. I'm not going to get too much into AY. I'll leave that one for a future story time. I just want you guys to know that I was dividing my time every week at home. I had to split my time between preparing something for the kids in the Sabbath School and preparing something, however short it was, for AY. Just letting you guys know that. And it was funny because the less time I had, the better I performed under the crunch, and I actually got a lot done in that time. And so that was very, very good. We started getting a lot of children in my class, and that was because, first of all, I was getting through to these kids. I really was. But remember how I mentioned that the other teachers or the other church members didn't want to teach and do the classes? So that problem didn't get solved in their classes. So those teachers would slowly quit, and when there was no one else, what they would do is they would throw that class into my class. And so my class kept expanding and shrinking back and forth, and it was crazy. I remember at one point over the many years, I ended up having my youngest student was 6 years old, and my oldest was 19 years old. And I was like, this is wrong. This shouldn't happen. Like, I get that the other teachers are having a hard time, but there's got to be a workaround to this. And, well, I'm not going to say that I was perfect with these kids. I at least was able to do a class. It rarely got me to the point where I walked out. A lot of the kids had problems and they had issues, and so that always presented a thing. Many of them didn't like each other, and so they would be yelling at each other in class. But I always just tried getting through them as best I could. Another thing that was a big deal in my Sabbath School experience was, I don't know how to call it in English. In Spanish, we call it Decimotercer Sábado, or 13th Sabbath, or end of quarter, whatever you guys want to call it. Typically, the kids do a pageant type thing at these. Either they sing, or they act, or they just show what they've learned, right? This is a tradition in most churches. I'm sure if you're Adventist and you're watching, you have this. So even though I didn't have any help, it seems that the 6 weeks before the 13th Sabbath, parents or church members started showing up to my class to rehearse what they were going to do for that Saturday. And typically it would start short, like they would take 5 minutes of my class, then 7, then 10, then 15, then the whole class. And I realized that we're prioritizing the wrong thing. I felt like even though the church didn't have time to help me, they had time for them to rehearse something that the kids would do once every 4 months or 3 months. And it was over. And I called him out on it, because back then that's how I was. I was like, you guys clearly have time because you can do this, right? And they all looked at me like, oh, but it's important that the kids do this. And I looked at them, I'm like, why? Why is it important? What exactly are they getting out of it? Now, for the record, I do believe that it's important to use kids in the church because it teaches them that it's their church. However, in this example, I felt that it was more about fan service for the parents, like a photo op, than it was about the kids learning. I wanted the kids to learn, but apparently I had to do it all myself, without any help, without a budget, spending my own money, which people keep taking, and then on top of that, half of the quarter was lost to practice something. And eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my foot down on this. From now on, whatever class I teach does not participate in the 13th Saturday programming. And everybody looked at me like I was a heretic. Like, you can't do that. That is tradition. As since I was, these old ladies would be like, since I was a wee little girl, they've always done this. You can't change it. I'm like, I just did. And that became another issue with that went back and forth. And I remember at one point they pull me over and they try to, to let me know it wasn't the ultimatum. If I don't do it, I'm going to be in trouble with the board. And I told them, if you guys want to do the 13th Sabbath programming, go ahead, but find yourself a new teacher because I will quit on the spot. Now, keep in mind, we were short on teachers back then. So when I said that, they were like, whoa, let's simmer down now, Eli. You see what I mean? There's a policy and procedure in how you're supposed to do things. And I wasn't really doing it back then. That eventually came back to bite me. Because in the future, I don't even remember what year this was, year 3 or year 4. They actually find me a helper. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm attacking or criticizing this person. Her and I had very different opinions on various things. I feel like most often than not, we were butting heads than we were actually helping one another. And this person honestly believed, and I'm not gonna accuse her of ill intent, right? She honestly believed that in order to get the kids more motivated about godly things, she had to pay them money, like literal cash. Like she would give them $1 if they studied, $2 if they did the memory verse, and $3 if they participated. But if they did all 3, they would get like $5 a week. Now, I had a problem with this because if you guys remember from when I did my Thursday talk last time, I covered on how when I was young, what broke me was the fact that the young people didn't want to do anything in the church, but when they were offered $20, they all wanted to do it. And so I kind of felt like history was repeating itself. Like the whole reason why I decided to become a Sabbath School teacher in the first place was to prevent that from happening all over again. And now the person who's supposed to be my helper is doing the very same thing that I am against. And again, I'm not accusing her of ill will or ill intent. She really was doing what she believed was right. She may have even seen our church do it in the past and she thought it's okay. But I really felt that it was wrong. And the reason why I felt it was wrong, here we go, high-tech scripture programming, is because 1 Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." So I feel like that scripture was dead on accurate. We're supposed to teach the kids in Sabbath school. We're supposed to teach them the love of Christ, not the love of money, because the love of money is the root of all evil. And I felt like this was, to me personally, this was clear. To my helper, not so much. But because my helper honestly believed that I was making a mistake, what she kept doing was she was going behind my back and telling the kids that yes, they were going to get money and that I had approved of it, even though I never approved it. But she kept saying that I did approve it. And so I would show up and I would find the kids all expecting them to get paid. And I'm like, we're not doing this. And I would speak with the lady. I'm like, you can't keep telling this. And this lady, she would keep telling me, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But then she would do it again because she honestly believed that I was wrong. And I honestly believed that she was wrong. And so we were butting heads over a very crucial thing. And you see, this is why I say I skip policy and procedure. And then she started skipping policy and procedure because I did it. And she would go behind my back and do stuff. And it was just a big mess. Eventually, we met together, and I think the pastor was, the Sabbath School department. And we were speaking about it. And I was like, look, the way I see it, either one of us going to have to leave. Either I leave or she leaves. But yeah, see, you get the idea. All right, either I leave or she leaves. But we don't work together because two, as the Bible says, two cannot travel together if they agree not on where they're going. And we seem to be going in opposite directions. So when I said that, she sort of started backing off and telling me to reconsider. But at that point, it became obvious that which one is leaving? Am I leaving or are you leaving? And she just looked at me. He's like, all things considered, I respect you as their teacher, and I do think that you're doing a great job. I just thought I was helping you. And so with that, she left. And so again, there is no ill will for me towards her. Sometimes we have different views, and it is what it is. So this is not me criticizing her. And if by some reason you're watching this video, you being the lady that helped me, I'm not angry. It's just, it's unfortunately we couldn't work together. It happened. So that was another of my Sabbath school experiences. Another one was, and this is one of the good ones. This is one of the ones that I was proud of. I decided, and this was back when I was breaking the rules, right? Or breaking policy and procedure. I decided that without approval from the board or from the church, I was going to extend my class time by an extra hour. And I was going to use this extra hour to answer the questions that were troubling the hearts of the young people. Right? And then after that hour, I would do the class. And I thought that was a great idea. I still do think it was a great idea. I just wish I had gone to the proper channel to get it approved. But anyways, so I started doing that, and I was angry. I was like, if the church tells me something, I'm gonna read them the riot. They never told me anything about it. It is what it is. Anywho, so I remember one of the first things the young people brought up was they wanted to see this video series called Acts by Riley Taylor, like the book of Acts, right? Acts by Riley Taylor. And I had used one of those videos in the past, and it was, dare I say it, irreverent. They covered the book of Acts in a very fun, satirical way. Too fun, dare I say. It was too fun for church. And once I accidentally used those videos because I didn't realize it was going to be that crazy. And the kids all loved it, so they wanted to do the series with me. I'm like, okay, I'll do the series, but on one condition. First, we have to read the actual chapter from Acts in the Bible. So the deal was they watch the video, we read the book of Acts, and then they watch the video again. So they see it to get context, then we read and clarify what actually happened, and then we see the video again. And so I did that every week. We would come in, we would watch a video, we would read the book of Acts, watch a video again, and we did that through every chapter of the book of Acts. And wow, I'm still, the kids actually cared. As crazy as these videos were, and I totally recommend them. It's on YouTube, Acts by Riley Taylor. As crazy and irreverent as they were, they actually got these kids to care about what was happening in the Bible, the book of Acts no less. And so they would, throughout the rest of my career as Sabbath school teacher, these kids would quote and reference Acts and remember the things that happened just because of this series. And yeah, I was very proud of that. After we covered book of Acts, I remember one of the kids asked me, how do we get here? Like, we know that the Bible, right? We know that there's a Bible, and we know about Jesus, and we know about Moses, and we know about Noah. But what does that have to do with us today? Like, what is the relevance? What is the connection? Like, we don't see it. So I was like, oh, okay. And I just started going off in order of everything in the Bible, like Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Abraham, and I just started going down as quickly as and I just started talking very fast and just making this long thing, explaining how one story leads to the other, 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 and then eventually, boom, Jesus died, Acts happens, Christians are being persecuted, and then boom, the Bible just ends. And I told them, okay, so the Bible ends. Now what? To answer your question, a lot happened since then. And so we started taking that extra hour every week to go over what happened. So I started going through the Christian persecution. I then talked about Saint Constantine and how he converted Rome, the Roman Empire, to a Christian thing. I spoke about how the Dark Ages happened and how Rome made it illegal to have a Bible, and how the Protestant Reformation eventually happened, and the French Revolution, and the Mayflower, and then the first awakening, and then the second great awakening, and then I started talking about 1844, and then Ellen White, and how she found it. And so over the course of many weeks, I kept going over all of this. And the kids were surprisingly following it. And then I remember at the end of it all, when we closed that book, or not that book, but that whole subject, the kid was like, wow, so it does all connect back to us. And I'm like, yeah, it's just one big story. It's not just the Bible. I told him, like, the Bible's not just a bunch of random stories in their own separate universe. Like, it is one continuous story. And then I briefly spoke to them about the great controversy and how that relates to everything. And so I would use this extra time to really resonate with the young people. And this went on for many, many years. Like I mentioned earlier as well, at one point I had my youngest student was 6 years old, and another point my oldest was 19. And that is because eventually the teacher for the teenagers quit. And I essentially inherited all of the young people, and that was interesting, because even before the young people, the teenagers teacher quit, right, the cornerstone teacher quit, the teenagers would show up for that 1 hour that I had before class started. They would show up and they would listen and they would ask questions, and then they would just go their own separate way. And I never invited them, like I never did. This was just supposed to be from my group of people, but that worked. And so another great thing that happened one day, this kid returns from college, right? And he was about my age. We grew up together in the same Sabbath school, but he just went for college, and I kind of forgot about him. So while in college, he sort of becomes reawakened, and he returns back to our church years later, wanting to share that experience. And so he's met with a church, and he quickly catches up with everything that's been going on, and he was disappointed that the children's ministry and the youth ministry kind of fell. And he also couldn't believe that the one thing keeping it alive was me. Because again, we grew up together, and as much as we love each other, we didn't really think of the other one as this great leader. Like, we knew each other, and we were like, yeah, you're going to my church and you're cool, but we're not really the leader types. And so he was like, okay, so you've been keeping it alive. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, well, I want to do this plan for the kids and for the young people. Like, do you think it's feasible? And I'm like, honestly, if you tell me that it's feasible, then I'm with you 100%. And so he started doing that. And he was mainly doing it by himself, and I was doing my own thing. There was some overlap between the two of us, but we would occasionally communicate to make sure that we were on the same page, and we were teaching the kids and the young people the right thing. And that happened. And I'm very grateful, because that was a huge help at the right time. Another thing that happened was adventurous. And yet, see, I say adventurous now, and I realized I was supposed to be wearing my scarf, because it's scarf challenge. I was going to wear it. Well, too late now. Or is it? Is it too late? Oh, I can't do this now. No, come on. It has to be worn. It should have been worn from the beginning. All right, there. Let's just pretend that I always wore it. So at some point during those many years, some of the parents decided they want to start the Adventure Club. Now, I never joined the Adventure Club as a child because I thought that the uniforms were terrible, and I still do. And back then, I would much rather be caught dead than wearing those uniforms. But given the situation of the church, especially in children's ministries, and the fact that the parents were actually trying to do something, I decided I was going to swallow my pride and join the adventurers as an instructor so that I could help out in every way possible. And that meant that I had to wear the uniforms. Unfortunately, there was no getting around it. I'm not going to delve too much on that because, again, that's another story. But just so you guys know, I was doing AY. I was doing adventures. I was doing the Sabbath School lesson, and I was doing the whole hour before the class on various topics that the kids were doing. And pretty much I had all week to prepare. Every week I had to spend every day trying to prepare as much as I could so that, Sabbath and Friday evenings, well, yeah, that's still Sabbath, so that Sabbath period, I could just cram as much knowledge into these kids. Not just knowledge, but also that compassion into the kids as possible, because someone had to do something. I remember overall I lasted about 7 years from beginning to end. And in those 7 years, I ended up getting this huge depression, which started slowly at first. And this was because I was exerting myself too hard. There's an old saying, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And like, it got really bad, but I felt that if I quit, the ministry would fall, because for a long time I was the only thing holding up children's ministry and youth ministry in my church. So I really didn't want to just quit, because I knew that all the work that I did was gonna fall apart, and I didn't want to do that, right? And eventually people showed up. And so in 2014, I felt that finally there were enough people in the church doing things with the young people and with the children that if I left, it would survive. And so in 2014, I decided that I was going to quit. But then the church basically started begging me, like, no, you can't quit. We don't have a plan in place for if you quit. And I'm like, no, it's fine. There's enough people. And they're like, yeah, there's people, but they haven't been trained. Could you give us one more year? Could you give us one more year in which you're just training your replacements, so that when you do leave, we got a plan in place? And I agreed. And 2015 was my last year. Yeah, that was interesting. Another interesting thing is that I started teaching again. I was supposed to teach primary, but I got a bunch of juniors. And in the 7 years that I was with them, those juniors grew up and became teenagers. And they eventually bumped me up to cornerstone teacher, so I was teaching the teenagers. Even though I was supposed to start with primary and I got juniors, I ended up doing cornerstone. So I just kept growing. And at the same time as that was happening, I was also doing adventures with the little kids. And it was just crazy, because I became this constant that no matter what age you were in the church, you probably knew me for some reason. Unless you were an adult, because that was another thing. I showed up early to church. Usually, in the wintertime, it will be before sunrise. And I would stick around. Like I would do church, and then we would do the other guy from college would do the message for the young people, and then I would stay for potluck, and then I would do adventures after that. So by the time I got out of church during the winter months, it was already nighttime. So Saturdays I rarely saw the light. Like, it was crazy. I felt like I was banished. Oh man, it was so exhausting, but it was worth it. And I think I proved one thing: it's possible if you try. It's possible if you care. I almost use a phrase that maybe not appropriate for a Christian. It's possible if you give. I'm not gonna finish that sentence. But you know what? If you actually demonstrate that you care, and you don't just sit down waiting for other people to do stuff. If you crank down until it hurts, until it makes you depressed, until your wallet is empty, until you're frustrated and you want to flip tables and you end up partnered with people that make you go insane. If you hunker down and you do all of that, you do end up getting results. And I did end up getting results with these kids. And these were the same kids that many people felt were hopeless, right? That same group that people were like, oh, they're too mature, they're too rambunctious, they don't care, you're trying too hard, just do the lesson and leave. That group, I got through. And I'm proud of that. To this day, these kids I still see, and they still have great opinions of me. Many of them have left the church, but even besides that, even with them leaving the church, they still see me and they're happy and they hug me. And I feel that effect made the whole painstaking process worth it. And a whole bunch of other things happened, but we're running out of time. So I will say this: all things are possible in Christ who strengthens us. Cost me a lot of money, a lot of time, and my mental health. I did eventually get my mental health back after I stepped down in 2015. It took me about 18 months to regain my sanity. And just be able to be happy most of the time. And as you guys can see, it's 2020, and now I am youth leader again. So I didn't leave 100%. I did take a much needed vacation, much needed break. So yeah, with that said, I'm running out of things to say. So yeah, that's what I want to leave it. Once again, if you see your Sabbath school teacher or your Sabbath school teachers in your church, thank them. It's a hard job. Some people take it more seriously than others. Others are broken down due to failure and past experience and negative experiences. And I had so many negative experiences that I considered quitting altogether so many times. There were so many times where I really felt like just saying, that's it, I quit, I'm out. The only thing that stopped me was the fact that if I did that, the kids would lose. And then the people that may be mad would not be affected whatsoever. So that was the only reason why I stayed. And yeah, it is tough, you guys. It is tough. But yeah, with that said, I think we've spoken enough. So yeah, this is me to show you. These are the boxes that I use for materials very quickly. There's a lot of stuff. There's some yarn, coloring books and Bibles and pens and pencils and Scotch tape and everything. And with that said, that is the end of today's Thursday talk. So long, farewell of readers and goodbye. Hopefully I was more animated than last time. I forgot to exaggerate things for effect. But hey, at least it was more genuine. And I can't believe I didn't wear the scarf the whole time. Anyways, with that said, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching and bye.